On today's episode of the Shifting the Narrative video podcast, we have a brilliant founder, Huib Van Bockel, founder of Tenzing Energy. And really this is a true Shifting the Narrative episode, all around the shifting narrative in communications and business in the FMCG space. So without further ado, let's take it over to Huib. So I am super stoked for today's guest, Huib Van Bockel, the founder of B Corp certified Tenzing Energy. Now, we actually shared some employment time together many years ago when we were both working for a well-known energy drink brand known for giving people wings, with Huib being the head of marketing and playing a transformative role in moving Red Bull to this media business rather than just an energy drink business. And since then, he has launched Tenzing Energy, which are totally disrupting not just the energy drink market, but the wider soft drinks game. And they really are challenging the status quo when it comes to the drinks market. They're really trying to push the sustainability-focused approach with this brand lens. And I know that's a huge testament to yourself and your vision. And yeah, I just couldn't be a better guest for the Shifting Narrative podcast. So welcome, Huib.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And we're in the amazing Amsterdam. Your home.
Yeah, it is. It is now. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So tell us, what was it like when Tenzing happened? Like, was it a slow build? Was it just a sudden idea? Where did it come from?
Well, as you just said, I was, I was working for Red Bull for a long time, and which I absolutely enjoyed. I love lots of love the people there, and the brand, had amazing aspects to it. But I always thought, it should be possible to create something that is like natural. And I'm a big fan of the natural world. So I was always leaning way more towards those sports as opposed to the Formula Ones or the motorsport side of things. And I think, sometimes you get this urge to start something for yourself, and that's what, and so at one point I left. And then there was obviously there's a lot of choices there. And then the most scary one is start for yourself. But then, that's what I decided to do. And then obviously, from the decision to start till launch was about a year. So yeah, I guess, that's about how long it usually takes, I guess. It was even slightly less than a year. So I guess relatively quick, but yeah, you could do it faster. But I think, so but when I left Red Bull, I had no intention yet, really. There was no name there. There was no real concept. It really started after I left, yeah.
And where did the concept come from? Were you in Nepal tracking when the idea?
Well, that was where the final kind of name and concept came from. But my basic idea was super simple. And I think that's always a really interesting point, actually, because, I'm very much about like making a difference and doing something I wrote a book on that. It's called The Social Brand. It was written a long, long time ago. And it was about doing something that really matters with your brand, not about being on social media, but being social.
Yeah.
And, but I've always had a real hatred. It's quite deep. I don't know why, but for the start with why, because I don't think it starts there, right? I think you have to start with a concept that can work. And then you kind of, you try and build it in as well to make it like part of the concept. So I think for me, the starting was really about like people look at energy drinks and are worried about two key things. The fact that they're full of sugar and the fact that they're all artificial, so it's filled with artificial, taurines, sweeteners, preservative, whatever. So I thought it should be something possible to make something that energy from nature that gives back to nature. So that was the first ever concept. So I guess there's a bit of why that we should maybe reel my hatred back in. So I think there's a bit of because because I've always loved the great outdoors, and I thought something about that taking energy from nature, give it back. So that was the basic, very first idea. But then you have to still come up with the concept, come up with the name, and that is it's a long, difficult process. Yeah.
We'll maybe explore that in a little bit more depth over the conversation. But I've read that there was a pretty poignant moment that you had once you'd set up Tenzing, once it was in stores. And I think it was during the pandemic when you were out running and you saw essentially a sign kind of clapping and celebrating essential workers. Tell us about that moment.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because you have to kind of go. So that the whole idea of Tenzing was always to have a real big role in sustainability. So basically that same concept, right? From nature for nature, energy from nature for nature. But we realized when we were just starting that no one cared. And I was actually a bit of a, just before the pandemic hit, in a bit of like, because there was a big energy drink that's also now available in the UK and it's called Bang. And it's just like the least, it's like worse than Monster. It has like 300 milligrams of caffeine.
Wow.
Red Bull has 80, so 300 milligrams of caffeine. It's all filled with artificial stuff. The founder is just this horrible dude. At least as far as I've seen him a couple of times. Like, at least there's no care about planet, whatever.
Yeah.
And yet he was the fastest growing energy drink ever. So we were like, do people really care about this stuff, right? And interestingly, I don't think they really do. It's like that. And that is the difficulty for people like ourselves who are in this business. And there's the claimed versus the actual, right? And I think very much, people are in front, they need a bit of energy, they want an uplift. And they're looking at the one that will provide them that with the least kind of negative stuff, right? So I think that's where we were like coming from, like, shit, should we really be going after this? We were spending a lot of money, it's a lot of time on this side, on our sustainability side, and do people really care? Are we not better off spending off that time in more sales or more promotions?
Yeah, sure.
And then COVID hit. And it was a very difficult time for me, to be honest, because I was just also, I don't know, what was it? When was COVID? 2020?
Yeah, so it's a few years ago now.
Yeah, so it was 4 years into my Tenzing journey, right? So that's like a very scary moment still. I think if it would happen 1 year before, I don't think we would have made it. 1.5, maybe a year before. But still, I had to let people go, put people on furlough. We had a whole Zing team. 25 students, which I loved and all knew. We had to let a lot of people go. And it was really, and we've got a real close-knit kind of family type team. So there was that element that was super stressful. There was like, will we even make it? Was it all for nothing? And I always used running as my way to kind of clear the mind. And even that didn't work anymore, because then I was walking past this sign. I always had this fixed run between Chiswick and Richmond. There's this really beautiful run that you can do on the river. So it's like you're in London, but you're like in the middle of nature. And there was this big sign up saying, thanks to all our essential workers. And I just didn't feel essential at all. So it was like, at my lowest, running or past that sign got me even lower. But that was actually the moment that I thought, okay, well, it sounds, looking back now, it sounds a bit naff maybe, but it was really this deep insight, like, let's then be essential for the next big crisis or this other and huge crisis that is happening, which is the environmental crisis. And then we really picked things up. And from that moment on, we said, okay, we don't care if no one cares. We're going to do this for ourselves because we just think it's very important. And I think off the back of that, actually, a lot of good things came. But the starting point was really like not caring what everyone else thought, and then and we really started a couple of things. We went down the B Corp route, but we also started we want to take full responsibility for our carbon footprint, which I think we should talk about that later, because I think that's the most essential bit that we do. So that's where it triggered, like, at your lowest point. And I think it's true though. It's that you get your best ideas, or that's where you kind of can move up from.
Yeah, I often talk about the default mode network, which is a part of our brain, which is often relating to the kind of creative and strategic part of the brain, which switches on when you switch off.
Yeah.
So that's why we have the best ideas in the shower or on your run. And
running in nature, I think that's also, it's been a big part of, actually, I always used to run a bit. I did a couple of marathons in the past, but actually funny enough, just because of the competitive side, and I love doing them, but I'd hardly train. When I was younger, that was possible. But actually, only when I started Tenzing, I became a proper runner. Like really 2-3 times. Like I did one this morning. And nearly like every other day, I go for a run.
Do you think that's like a key part to you being able to drive and grow this business forward? Be the best founder that you are? Definitely.
So I think there's a huge, like, one of the things I noticed. Let's say at my other like big job, if you're a marketing director, it's quite easy. People come to you and go, we've got an idea. What do you think? This, and you go, that one. And so there's a huge reactive. I mean, I would say the job is majority reactive. So you're
Yeah.
in meetings, you like host it, and then there's a meeting. But when you're starting, I was on my own for a long time. And everything you have to initiate, judge yourself, which is very difficult. So you just come up with something, and then you have to think to yourself if that then is a good idea. It's very, very difficult. So it's very tiring. So if I noticed, like, not that I was never like I would never drink. I'm more of a binge drink type person.
Yeah.
I never like drink during the week. Anyway, but I I would never I would not drink a single drop, because I noticed if I wasn't sharp, the next I just couldn't work, because also it's tough. And I think the running, it would really kind of help me out. I'm physically fit, but I just mainly for the mental fitness for sure. So it's an absolute, I think it's very important to have something like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I can just imagine you running a marathon without training and then just going for a big weekend.
Yeah, exactly. In the old days. Yeah.
So yeah, let's go back to that kind of brand perception, because to me, I guess the energy drink product and market is perceived as this kind of high octane, high energy, hustle focused brand image, and I guess it's focused on people driving, skydiving, working all hours. And I'd say that most brand identities for large energy drink brands reflect that visual identity, and also that kind of that messaging identity as well. The sustainability world, though, on the other hand, is perhaps a bit more about reconnection and slowing down.
Yeah.
I guess I'd be really interested to know, has that been a challenge, especially as you're building this organization, which is, very much ethically focused in a market which doesn't really have that?
Yeah. Very much so. It's like, it's been it's the biggest challenge. And interesting enough, we've launched in the UK about 6 years ago now. And I think you were there, you tried our first cans. So that's cool. And you've been part of that journey. And we've really changed the minds of not everyone who knows, because not everyone knows us by any means, but of a sizable group of people in the UK that see that's possible. It took so long. Now I've just moved to Holland to launch here, and it's like it's starting all over again. And you get like, we don't sell that kind of drinks, and so it's very difficult because we've chosen essentially the worst category. That is built around high octane, literally octane, right? That is gasoline, right? It's built on gasoline, and also artificial ingredients. Everyone knows that, they're filled with artificial ingredients. But interestingly enough, what I also didn't entirely realize is that people think it works because of that. So yes, it's really bad for me, but I need an uplift now, so I'll take it. So we took away the two key things. One, we took away the artificial ingredients, so people thought, does that really work? It's natural. And second, we took away the marketing, high octane stuff. So that also doesn't help with, does it really work? So it has been, and still is, a huge challenge. And we've always said, like, we want to break that cycle. So the current energy drinks is, we're taking a lot of artificial ingredients, build it into a drink, and then market that drink with a lot of high octane fossil fueled marketing. And we say we change that cycle. So we take it from nature and we give it back to nature. But yeah, I think it's a long journey. But I think that's also one of the key learnings of any startup. If I've of course talked a lot to people, I do talks, and then people come up to me with ideas. And that's very often you're like, we want to exit in 2 years and this and that. And then you just know you would never invest. Or not that I don't invest in any. I was just too busy with my own stuff. And don't have the money. But I think the main thing is just you have to take your time. It just takes a lot of time to build a brand.
And focus.
Yeah, focus. That's another good point. Exactly. Because a lot of people go like, I could have been in 50 countries by now. But that means nothing. It's like sending a pallet to Abu Dhabi and saying, "Hey, we're there," because we get requests on a weekly basis since we started. But I think, and it's very tempting now and then. And sometimes we did do it, but we've always lost money in that sense because then you're stickering cans or And I think we've really focused on the UK only, and now on Holland. And funny enough, even looking back, I would have waited to launch in Holland. In the UK we are now. I would say. Established is not a right word, but like we've gone through this invisible gate, as we've always said. If every time I go to the UK now, I see people on the street drinking Tenzing,
What's that feeling like?
Amazing. It's funny, because obviously the last time I went, came into our new office, and there was a girl drinking a raspberry yuzu just in front of the office, and I was like, oh my god! I just go like, oh, can I take a picture? Can I take a picture? And she was like, overwhelmed by this. Who's this guy wanting to take pictures? Like, I know she was like 25, she was like on her way to work, and then really nice. She was like, okay, and then she's standing there. And then she found me, and then on Instagram, she said, "Oh, it was the drink I loved and drank for years, and I was so overwhelmed at the time, but it was so cool to meet you." And it was really, it's really nice. So I think I just spontaneously react to those things, and it's really nice then to get the feedback as well. But it's now, it's literally every time I go back, and that's the funny thing about being in Holland. You're all of a sudden like this uncle who goes back and sees their child grow every time they're back. So I used to see like one person, and now I see two people drinking it. So that's really cool. But I think in Holland, it is like starting all over again. And again, it reminds me, and I constantly say, was it as tough in the UK? Or is this Dutch market have I forgotten how tough it was? Or is this Dutch market very different? And I actually just think I've forgotten how tough it was. So yeah, it's starting. It's a bit easier because our story's better. We've got a better portfolio. At the same time, it's also harder because actually you go a bit quicker. So you get distribution faster, but then the rate of sale, then not enough people know about it. So, and that's why it's also such a good talk about focus on your question. Like we've kind of, I wouldn't say, you know what I mean, right? We're on a good place in the UK, and then we're launching our second country, and just getting all these learnings. And then once we do that, we can maybe launch in two other countries at the same time. But now, these are the only two. So I think, just take your time. I think that's the key. Yeah.
When we were both at this large energy drink brand known for giving people wings, I actually found it really, really easy as well to do our work, because ultimately you put an event on, people turn up.
Yeah.
If there's a cool party going on, you get contacted, and then you can have a fridge or a DJ table just with really brilliant brand exposure, which most brands would have to pay an arm and a leg for.
Yeah.
And you get it all for free, or in fact, you'd get it in return for a couple of cases of, of Red Bull.
Yeah.
But they did that through the power of brand.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the industry followed them. Suddenly, you'd have a competitor brand which would have a really cool looking truck with a DJ on it.
Yeah.
And they would be kind of really like trying to copy the approach because it's a proven approach.
Yeah.
Do you see that might be the case with Tenzing? Yes, you talked about, the fact that things take time.
Yeah.
But these brands might also be looking at you saying, look, we need to take a leaf out of these guys, but we need to look at carbon labeling. We need to look at
exactly
that process.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's two things. One is indeed, it's one of the things that inspired me as well. Like, when I left, someone asked me a question right in the beginning when I was still by myself. It's like, it must be so difficult now because you used to do marketing and now you have to do finance, operations, product development, sales.
HR.
Well, no, HR was just myself, so that wasn't them. But, and which do you find most difficult? And I had to think, and I thought, marketing. Because the rest was all, I know it's difficult because I hadn't done it before, but it's relatively straightforward, like sales, it's doable. But marketing, making something out of nothing is just very difficult. And I think, even when I was at Red Bull, I started, when Red Bull was there was still, exactly like you said, we still had a Flash website, and on the front of the website was our office, so YouTube wasn't even around. And so I was lucky enough to be part of that process. I didn't, I didn't claim too much, but to be part of the process. But I also always think at the same time, if I wouldn't have been there, Red Bull would have still been successful, so I think that's what I always say to everyone. But Tenzing wouldn't have been there without me and without the team that we have, because you mentioned Jack Flower was our first ever person in the team.
Big ups, Jack Flower.
Yeah, and he was without him we wouldn't be here. So it's and that's the cool thing. Of having starting, you really, and that's also one of the key reasons I started for myself. It's just like, just show myself what I was made of, and to kind of feel that what's difficult. And that's also really interesting because most of the consultants, marketing books, they're all catered to these big companies, because that's where the most business is. Most people work there, and those are the people that buy those books or buy those consultancies. But there's not a lot of stuff being written or done around like how to start them, and there is no real rules, I would say,
and how to change your whole industry, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, did you set out for Tenzing to be this teacher brand, to say, well, hopefully we're going to shake up the whole of this energy drink market, but also the wider drinks market? And, you know, I know that you've got some really core initiatives like your carbon labeling, you know, like linking to the Rainforest Alliance, you know, certain certifications.
Yeah.
Like, are you wanting other energy drinks brands to come and follow you?
Yeah, so when I started, that was definitely kind of not the goal. It was all about kind of, you know, just doing this that I was passionate about. But you do see it happen now a lot. I heard a great story of someone who was at the Lucozade office, and they were presenting our case. And he said that the marketing director apparently said, "Don't mention Tenzing in this office again." And I was like, wow. That
must be actually quite
story.
yeah,
I know, because they probably get, you know, again, they're 1,000 times bigger than us or whatever. But they do see that. They do see all our initiatives, all the carbon labeling, taking responsibility for our total carbon footprint. So I do think it works. It was never the intention as such, because I don't think that was a bit of a big arrogant statement to go out when you're just like walking around with your can trying to sell it to a local convenience store.
Yeah.
I want to change the world. It's like, no, please buy this case of 24. But I think it was just our passion and what we believed in. Like I said, you know, and we really had the shift in COVID times. And then I do think, you know, even though we're still small compared to those absolute big dogs, I do think they are paying attention now. Yeah. In the beginning, they're not. You know, in the beginning, they're all thinking, so many have tried. It's not going to make it. But I think they now realize we're kind of here to stay. And yeah, they're paying a bit of attention, I'd say.
I think that's super cool. And to be honest, I see that being the biggest influence that, you know, purpose-driven organizations are having. I believe that, you know, business is the vehicle for mass change. And I also believe that in the current system that we're working in, you know, economics does make change. It is a competitive advantage, whether you like it or not, especially in the food and drinks world, to have the B Corp certification. You know, people are striving for it. And, you know, I think rightly or wrongly, people are going through that process. And I'm a big believer that we need to have brilliant tools like the B Impact Assessment to guide organizations through this transformation journey. There is, you know, obviously some slightly worrying elements where you have brands who are paying consultants to ultimately do the certification for them, and then they have that logo, and that logo is on the can or the product, and whether that, you know, helps for more investment or an exit, or whether it is, you know, ultimately for you know, better recruitment options. There are a plentiful amount of benefits for it, but I do think that once people understand that there's recertification, and especially as I believe next year the recertification is going to be harder, it will lead to, I think, you know, us really seeing the brands who are truly, you know, putting the kind of mission first approach.
Exactly. I think this is a good point, because I think people just, it's like, it's the same as everything. They go like, I want to be B Corp. So we have a lot of certifications, right? B Corp, or, you know, Rainforest Alliance, you know, we carbon label. That's also at the end of the day a certification, because it certifies that you have checked your whole carbon footprint. But that it's not like you've got them and you're done. I think that's where the main thing to realize. You've
continuous improvement,
and
right?
We've only got a small team, and like total about 16 now, and there's one person dedicated to this, you know, to make sure that we hit these, and so that's why I think if you're thinking I'm going to get the certification and I'm done and put it on, that's a big mistake, because you're going to have to constantly reprove yourself and get better and lower your footprint. For instance, you know, you want to kind of, you know, we work with a lot of different organizations, and one of them says you have to lower your footprint every year, which we also want. But it is also nice to have someone, an external person, that says, where are you with that? Because you can get lost in your day-to-day jobs as well. So I think certification is important, because it keeps you on the right path. And if you're just doing it for the label, then you're going to be really kind of, I think in trouble in that sense, because you're going to have to keep paying these consultants.
What advice would you give to people wanting to align themselves to, let's specifically look at carbon labeling, because I think, you know, that is still pretty unique.
Yeah, very unique, to be
in
honest. It's
drinking.
like I think it's Allbirds in the shoes. On the shoe side, it's Oatly and us. And there's a handful of others, but it's not a lot. We were the first soft drink, I think, on Earth that carbon labeled. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And what was the journey? How did you do that?
Well, it's I think so. We say give back to nature, like take from nature, give back to nature. And the first key element is that I have the simple thing is just take full responsibility for your carbon footprint. And by that we mean we've defined four things. One is just know it, and then the second is show it. So carbon label it all. Then lower it, right? And then locally offset what we cannot lower. So those are our four key mantras. And most companies already fall short on the first. They don't even know it.
Yeah.
Like I was actually speaking to a big clothing brand the other day that is known to be the most sustainably clothing brand. I don't want to name them, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And I think, how can you not know your carbon footprint? So I think, it's something I can, and I think that should just be obliged by government. I think we do need government. We should say you need to carbon label. You need to know your footprint, because how could you manage your carbon footprint if you don't even know it? You know, and I think that is it should be an absolute given. And I think there's a couple of elements in there as well. So if you show it, so that I always get the question, okay, you've got a carbon label on here. You know, it says 0.45 carbon equivalents. Who understands that? And I always go, nobody. You know, but I'm in the food and drink industry for quite a while, and I think it was the same with calories. Like, what is it, 20, 30 years ago? No one knew what a calorie was. You had a calojoule and kilocal. What's the difference? You know, no one knew what a calorie was. But then at one point, the government says you have to put it on there. Interesting enough, beer and cider doesn't yet.
Right.
Yeah, so what happens? They make the cider as lovely tasting as they possibly can. What does that mean? Add more sugar to a already very sugary apple drink.
It's crazy because actually there's been a really, really big campaign. I'll name it Strongbow. I actually think that the campaign that they did, from a kind of an influencer, from a sonic branding perspective, was really good. And they must have spent millions and millions and millions getting it out to the UK market. But their USP is the fact that it's got like 76 calories.
Yeah.
Like if
I saw that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's good that they're at least starting there, right?
Yeah.
So good, because I think they're going to have to. But it's a good example. If you're saying to companies you don't have to put your calories on there, there'll be a free for all. So the one main reason, if you put your carbon on there, is the first thing that will happen. And also, I noticed myself, I'm just putting it out to the world. This is the carbon. So what is my inclination? Try and get it down. You know, so because there might be, how cool would it be to start competing on that? So people, oh shit, that company's got a lower carbon footprint than I have to lower mine. Just
Totally.
like it's happening with calories.
Totally.
So I think the first thing is that because you're making yourself vulnerable, you're putting it out there, you'll be inclined to lower it. And in the long run, people will start to understand. You know, people will start to understand. And I don't think that'll happen in the first years, but it doesn't really matter. You know, I think it's the company that does it. Then the third element is, of course, of lowering it. You know, that's like nearly a given. Try and lower as much as you possibly can. Sometimes it's different than you might think, right? We source a lot of local sourcing is the one that everyone says, but sometimes, you know, you can get a pineapple from Brazil that has a lower carbon footprint than an apple from the UK. So it's really kind of then really finding out, but that's through the knowing. And then the last thing is locally offsetting. Now, offsetting, of course, has also this kind of sometimes bad image, which I just totally do not agree with it. If you're obviously just spending a lot, like, okay, if you've got like 2 Formula One teams and then you're offsetting it, I think that's crap. You don't need those Formula One teams. But if you're just doing business and you're getting some product, I mean, there's no way that you can, in my industry or any industry at the moment, really have something that's totally carbon neutral. It's not possible. Even net zero effectively means that you've lowered as far as you possibly can, offset the rest, right? So I think offsetting, if done well, and if done, you know, gold standards, everything, is just, so we invest in wind farms, for instance. Everyone agrees that those are good, right? That they help, you know, they stop climate change. So investing in that is actually making a difference, right? So I think it shouldn't be your only thing. You've got to it should be your last step after you know it, showed lowered it, you know, locally offset. But I do think it's important now. We just need those projects. And also interesting there, if you've committed, so we say we're carbon negative, so we offset more than we emit. But what does that mean for us? Because I'm convinced that offsetting will become more expensive by the simple fact of the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing, right? Getting that word out there, people wanting to do this. So it'll be more expensive to fund those projects. Again, you'll incentivize yourself to lower it as far as you possibly can. Otherwise, it will get really expensive. So in that sense, I'm a big believer in it as well.
And you've also got a number of social initiatives. I think that you created an app which I think Men's Health gave #1 most useful app possible. I know you've been giving back to I guess the real root of the brand name Tenzing in Nepal. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have two aspects to our sustainability. One is take responsibility for our product, which I think every business should do. And then secondly, we have our key communities. And our key communities at the moment are climbing, where it all kind of started, running and surfing. And then we've only, we did climbing for a long time. So it's, again, talk about focus. We did everyone at least for 2-3 years instead of doing all these scenes and doing all these communities. And for climbing, so we work with, Tenzing is of course named after Tenzing Norgay, and we work with the family. And at the time, it was getting quite a lot of press that Everest was very littered. And so I wanted to go in and do these cleaning because we thought it would be cool and go there. But Jomling, the son of Tenzing Norgay, said, we have to start building bins. There was literally oil drums on the way to base camp. So that's what we started doing. Our first little bit of money we earned, we built 2 big bins, stone bins. And now we're maintaining over 10. Building and maintaining over 10 bins there, all on the way. So they've got a little plaque on. So it's not the most effective marketing. Little plaques in Nepal.
Pretty niche.
Pretty niche, but I still, it's cool. So that we've really helped clean up those mountains there. But we do that from our community. So from our community perspective, we say we want to, climb clean mountains, run through fresh air, and surf kind of pristine oceans. So we have our product thing, and then we have our community aspects. And then with the running, again, it's such a beautiful thing as well. I'm a keen runner. I read an article about London that sometimes it's worse running than not running because it's so polluted.
Wow.
A piece by Imperial or King's College at the time. Now we work with Imperial College, and then we created an app that allows you to find and track the cleanest airs in the big smoke. And so it's a really simple tool, and we link it with Strava. So if you've downloaded the Tenzing Clean Air app, you sync it with your Strava, and every time you've done a run, you can look before, and every time you've done a run, you see your clean air score. And that got voted, the #1 app that will change your life by Men's Health, which is pretty cool because they're all actual app builders in that, for the rest of the list. And we're just a plant-based drinks business that did this on the side. So, but I think that's what I really believe in, actually doing things. And hopefully people will find out. And, so again, it's not people have asked me but how do you have to buy a Tenzing and then you can get this app? No, it's just for everyone, and I think.
Because that's your purpose, right? You're doing that because you believe that's a thing that is needed for the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it obviously comes at an expense, especially for a startup and a growing organization. But you're not necessarily doing that from a brand first lens. Obviously, it's massively beneficial for your brand and for your word of mouth, which is super important to ultimately grow your organization. But are you coming at it saying we need to do some cool stuff for our brand, or are you coming at it because you think that it's a cool thing that's actually going to give back to the world?
Well, I think the best ideas are always very when there's a tight brief somewhere in your mind. So again, this is a great example of me running authentically. So I remember I was speaking to Strava afterwards, and there's this other big energy drinks brand that come to us and say, we want to do something with running, as opposed to being an action organization that loves to run. So we'd have a run club every Thursday. People would come to our office. It stopped in COVID times, of course. We've just got our new office now, so we're seeing if we can bring it back somehow. But every Thursday we'd go running with a coach, and we'd find the cleanest air, run in it. So it was just a genuine, small kind of initiative. But the app has tracked over 1 million runs now as well. So, and every time they do that, you see that in your Strava. So probably millions of people have seen a little Tenzing Clean Air score in the. So it does work in that sense. But the basic principle is really what can we do? What can we do for people that we care about? Which is regarding our sustainability efforts. Yeah. So that's where it starts.
And what's next? Is there anything that you can let us know about with Tenzing? What you're most excited for the next year or so?
Yeah, that's a good question. because these ideas just come up when you never. So it's like I don't know yet. Yeah, I mean, for me, like from a business perspective, it's really trying to get this message across in the Netherlands because we're very far from that still. People just kind of really have a preconception about energy drinks. They're all bad for you.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think that is like from a business perspective, how do we really crack that?
It's funny because it seems like everybody has about 10 coffees a day here.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of coffee, a lot of energy drinks as well. But there are, yeah. So, and that's also the coffee. It's a good one actually, because we very often say like we're a refreshing alternative to a cup of coffee, which is probably better phrased than a better alternative to a energy drink, because people don't have any bad conceptions about coffee, but they are on the average is a latte, for instance, is about 4 times the amount of calories that there are in a Tenzing. There's a lot of calories in milk, of course. And
as well as a pretty big carbon footprint.
As well as a huge carbon footprint that we're finding out now. Actually, we're doing a little, the carbon footprint of a cup of coffee like you get from the Starbucks, probably at least 5 times of a Tenzing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think you're actually making it. It's more refreshing. Carbon footprint is lower. Your calories is way lower. So I think it's an easy choice.
And so that Netherlands market, I think I'm really excited to see what happens here, because this city seems to be focused around, a handful of brands who've got their homes here, which, have ultimately defined brand activism.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of brands that internally at Tenzing or yourself you're inspired by, or any campaigns that have, really caught your attention?
I always really love the brands that have, and I think we even also still fail to do that in the best possible way. We've just like put that at their heart, like the toilet paper who gives a crap.
Yes.
Yeah, so I love.
I'm a shopper.
Yeah. Oh, really? Brilliant. So it's like so we're a toilet paper that builds toilets. That little line seems so simple and so obvious.
It's a simple-minded proposition, right?
That is such a beautiful line. We're a toilet paper that builds toilets. And it's just, and it really, and 50% of their profits go there. They've donated something more than 10 million to make these toilets, because they say that's what contaminates the water. That's the most important thing. So I think I love those concepts that really have it at the heart. And we try and do that by saying, we're from nature for nature, we're plant powered and planet positive. But I wonder how many people of Tenzing will know this and would be able to replicate that. So those are the brands I really admire.
Those messages are almost becoming desensitized, because a lot of organizations are, flying the flag for plant-based, for example, and it's, ultimately it's not as unique. I think that single-minded proposition you just mentioned for Who Gives a Crap is a totally, like, you just get it. I guess it's similar to the kind of Tom's models, like the one-for-one model. Yeah,
no, they started it kind of, but interestingly enough, because I always follow those brands, Tom's didn't make it.
Yes,
and they are still going ahead, but I think they went into bankruptcy and he left, and so there could be many reasons for this. But I did see an interview as to why, and he said they just exploded, right? Because cool shoes as well, good, really cool shoes. Again, important if you start with why, but like the product has to really make sense.
Definitely.
And then that message, one for one, and it just exploded, got a lot of press and stuff. But then after that, you don't get that press. So I think it is important to keep that in mind. So that's what we try and do with like our initiatives in running. Then we have an initiative now. We have a limited edition of surfing can. We work with Surfers Against Sewage, and we source all our ingredients from Cornwall, or at least all the ones that we could. So the sea berries and the Cornish sea salt. We went there and I spoke to the farmers. It was really cool. And then we give part of the profits back to Surfers Against Sewage. So it's really like sourcing local, supporting local. So again, that got a lot of press in Cornwall. So I think you have to, so in that sense, that could be a disadvantage again of having that super simple single-minded message, that can you keep it relevant and can you keep it going?
I love it. Well, look, I think we could chat for hours and hours and hours and hours. So we'll maybe have to save that for a future episode, and maybe we can go down to the beaches of Cornwall and hang out with Surfers Against Sewage crew. But let's do some final takeaways. Favorite book to recommend to anyone in business and or sustainability? And I'm maybe going to give you 2 options here, because you can plug your own book as well.
Okay. I won't, but no, I'll give you 2 books though. I said one because it's just my favorite business book of all time. Actually, it's the Shoe Dog.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It's just the perfect book, and I think probably it's pretty standard because most people have read it. But it is still my favorite book.
You can also, for me, I'm an audiobook person, and you can listen to it 4 or 5 times and still glean information.
Yeah. And it has everything in there, right? It takes a lot of time. It's super tough. It's super lonely. It's doing something on the side. He was accountant for nearly 10 years, I think, on the side. I did that. I worked on the side. I did these speaking. So I wrote a book called The Social Brand. But I didn't need to plug it. But it was more like, no one reads it anyway. But it helped me, do my speaking gigs. And that did earn money. And then I could put that into Tenzing. So it is, I think, when you start your business, fully commit. But don't give up all your sources of income yet, right? You can earn on the side, and Phil Knight is a beautiful example. He started in Nike, for Christ's sake, and he was accountant for 10 years next to it, right? And it's just beautiful, it's emotional. I remember my wife reading it, and I knew at the end, and then she's just crying, So it's beautiful book. Definitely read.
Proper storytelling.
Proper story. And he's so honest as well about all his shortcomings, and it's amazing. And then from a sustainability one, I think a novel. Have you read The Overstory?
Oh, I haven't.
No, it's a long to fat book, but it's beautiful, and it's a novel about all these intertwining family stories. But trees is the key part of it, and there's just some elements. I don't know why I was very emotional when I read it, but at times I literally cried. And he says so we're genetically 25% the same as trees, right? I don't think a lot of people. I didn't know that. So at one point, our 1.5 billion years ago, we went separate ways. And at one point, which I thought was such a beautiful quote, I said, and it was on 2 separate planets, and later it sinked in. He goes, okay, if there's aliens that would come to Earth, they would move 1 million times faster than us, and we would just, for their standard, just stand there. After a while, they'd think, these are not living things. Wow. We can just cut them down. And that's the same with the tree. Trees actually migrate. They migrate from north to south, but they take thousands or tens of hundreds of thousands of years. They communicate with each other, and so it was absolutely beautiful book that I would highly recommend.
And what about music? What's the artist that you would have in the office when maybe a big deal has come through?
I actually just went to the concert, an old school, Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder. Yeah, nice. So I love the Eddie Vedder. I just saw it at Pearl Jam actually in Hyde Park, and he's just got, for me, because that's one of my favorite movies, Into the Wild.
Yeah, that's such a great soundtrack. Before that. Eddie Vedder really smashed it.
That Society song is probably one of my favorite songs. So having him do one of his voiceovering or singing, just humming would be fine. I'm a big fan. So that would be high on the list.
And what about when you run? Is there an album, or I guess the thing is with Eddie Vedder, it's definitely thought-provoking music, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, then my favorite is Madness.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it has that kind of speed to it. I don't know why I really like it. But I do 3 different things with the run. Actually, this morning, I did listen to a podcast. Diary of a CEO is one of mine. Nice. Also, I do like that one, to be honest. Or Sam Harris, I love listening to him. So it's either a podcast, Nothing, which I also do a lot, just with running with Nothing, because the no ideas come if you just do podcasts, of course. Well, sometimes they can. And then music could be but that's funny enough, Madness would be on the number 1 spot there. And I never listened to them non-running, funny enough.
Love it. Yeah. And if you could work with one influencer or person of influence,
sorry, it's not Madness. I don't know why I said Madness. Muse.
Muse.
Yeah. Okay. No, not Madness at all.
They are very. Madness.
No, I didn't really like Madness. I don't know why I said that. No, it's Muse. It's Muse.
Muse are pretty cool. I saw Muse headline the Pyramid Stage at Glastonbury once, and it was it was a pretty amazing show. And if you could work with one influencer, who would it be and why? Or person of influence?
I found that, we're really big into, climbing and bouldering. Also specifically, I've also taken up bouldering since about a year with my son. He loves it. So that's super cool. So I'd probably try and I was looking at all these really cool Japanese boulderers that are all, I don't know, in Japan, bouldering has this kind of etherical, beautiful other, like they have these boulder centers where there's a black route in every boulder center that nearly no one can do, and these top guys, they go to all these boulder centers to try and tick them off. So there's a couple of athletes there that I'd love to kind of work with.
Maybe help you break into the Japanese market.
Yeah, exactly. But also just I like whatever Alex or Jimmy Chin would be high on the list.
Yeah, he's cool.
He would probably be my number one because he's got everything. He's got the Oscars. He's got or the one, but he's like he's an athlete himself.
And you're gonna get some pretty cool content.
Yeah, I'd go with Jimmy. Yeah, so Jimmy, if you're listening, please get in touch. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Really enjoyed it, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
What a dude! What a conversation. Huib from Tenzing, and look, like marketing and purpose from core brands led from the core. They'd lead to memorable brands. And I know a lot of people who wouldn't ever touch an energy drink, but they know who Tenzing is. And it's a testament to Huib's leadership and his great vision for what he saw in the energy drink and FMCG market. He has created the largest growing energy drink brand in the UK. But he's also a vulnerable CEO. He's mucking in, he's sampling on the streets, and he feels a responsibility to do all of these things, not just lead the company. And that means that the rest of the team, which isn't a large team, they're also mucking in. They're not waiting for a different department to do the work. They're answering with action. And personally, this episode was really cool for me. I worked with Huib for a short amount of time when I was at university for a large energy drink brand, and over Giving People Wings, where he was the marketing director. And during this time, it was a really formative time for me, because it really showed the power of word of mouth, the power of brand. And it also showed me the power of blue sky thinking. I'm just super happy that my passion for nature and the environment and purpose had come before this time, during and just after my university career, as I was able to merge these passions with this blue sky thinking. And that's our ambition with every Enviro client, is to go big, but also stay deeply rooted. And it's really awesome to spend time with Huib in Amsterdam, especially in the space that we recorded in Equals. It's super important to get out of the location you tend to work in. So it gives you different perspectives, cultures, it gives you the opportunity to meet different people. So definitely expect more episodes recorded in different cities and countries. If you think there's anyone interesting in the climate, business, adventure, charity space to interview, then definitely get in touch. And definitely hit subscribe on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. Right then, thanks for listening. I hope there were some nuggets of inspiration, no matter your industry or interest. And over and out.